طيب السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته، يعطيكم العافية وشكرا لحضوركم معنا. طبعا اليوم عندنا خبير الابتكار مستر ماغنس بينكر. ماغنس طبعا he is the CEO and founder of Innovation 360 Group. He is the creator of Play Bold podcast. As we said, he is the CEO and founder of Innovation 360 Group. He is the creator of Play Bold podcast, where he inspires us to tackle innovation and growth with his hosts. Author of more than one book in innovation and business fields. Award winner of most innovative CEO in Sweden and the Growth Strategy CEO of the Year in Sweden 2016. Magnus, mashallah, the launcher of tens of startups and acquires more than 30 small to medium enterprises all over Europe. And today, Mr. Magnus with us is just to give us a nice talk about how to get back to business after a major crisis. But one more thing that I need to highlight, guys, stay with us till the end of the talk. We will have around 50 minutes with Mr. Magnus to give us his speech. Then we will have the last 10 minutes for Q&A. After that, we will have a draw for the attendees for the great 2 books has been edited and published by Mr. Magnus. Mr. Magnus, please go ahead and start your talk.
Thank you. It's amazing to be with you. I'm broadcasting from Stockholm in Sweden, so it's late evening here. I have the pleasure to work with you guys for some time, and I know that you do pretty bold things in Saudi. And we are actually going to spend this hour together to talk about how to get back in the business after a major crisis, as we are in the middle of right now. So at the end, we will have a few questions. So please post your questions in the chat box or in the Q&A, or just save it for later. We start here. A good friend of mine, a Hollywood screenwriter, said once, there are only 2 stories in the world. And what did he mean by that? Well, basically, when you write a Hollywood manuscript, it is basically that the person goes on a journey or a stranger comes to town. Here is the news. That's exactly how most things work in life. Either you go on a journey and you explore and you learn, or a stranger comes to town and you're the victim. The question is if you take control of your own life. And if you are the one going out to look for answers, to learn and impact and make a change. Or if you are the one sitting in your village and just let people come and do whatever they want. That is basically the idea behind this. So I will show to you, I will share a little bit about my life in New York. I lived there with my family until very recently, and now we moved back to Stockholm, Sweden. And when I was living in New York, this was a tweet that was sent out. It was the 26th of March this year, where someone came up with the idea to use blood plasma to treat COVID-19. Here's the interesting thing. That was actually tested 100 years ago with the Spanish flu. So you can look for answers in the past to find solutions for the future. And there are only 2 stories in the world. And with the virus, either the virus happened to you or you happened to the virus. That's the idea here. So in the US, that was my previous home country. During the World War II, it was a shortage of metal. And the Japanese people were very superior in war and quite successful. And US was having a lot of losses. And they needed more metal to fight back. And they didn't have metal. So they went up with a big campaign where they asked citizens for metal. They asked home wives, farmers, business people, children, hand in whatever you have. Hands, pot, equipment, metal toys. And they were actually able to collect enough metal to fight back. And again, there are all only two stories in the world. Either you accept shortage of metal, or you find a way to get the metal. And the same goes with the pandemic. Either you're the victim or you are the guy in control. The same goes with everything, every natural resources that you have in your country. You need to make up your own destiny. And this is a picture from me in New York. I am the guy on the right-hand side. And actually, it was a $500 penalty if you didn't have a mask. And this particular day in April, I actually went to the bank just to try. And I am looking like the guys on the left-hand side, the bank robbers. 3 months before April, they would shoot me at the bank. 3 months later, they didn't shoot me. It was a requirement. We just have to adapt and accept and find our own way ahead. I would like to quote Joseph Schumpeter. He said 100 years ago that innovation is the creative destruction where entrepreneurs combined existing elements in new ways. What did he mean? He meant that everything exists. Everything is out there. It's just a matter what you do with it. If you are the guy on a journey, you can find, you can combine, and you can create new things out of old things. And that will eventually lead to creative destruction, where old things might be destructed and new things are created. But it's the same elements. And it will be the same element. The only limitation is in your head. So in the situation that we are right now, we have macro factors that are very, very intensive or very strong and very present. We have the pandemic, global warming, mass pollution, macro conflicts, hyper competition, disrupting startups, digitalization, artificial intelligence, political change, new regulation, demographic change, and the effect is that we have lockdowns, disaster, health problems. We have new supply chains and the old one are disrupted. We have lots of businesses. We have new rules. We have a changing demand pattern among consumers. And the key solution is innovation and innovation management. So everybody talks about innovation. Why doesn't it really work? Well, only 10% of the companies have the capability they need to execute on their strategy. The problem is not the strategy. The problem is not how clever you are as a chief executive officer. The problem is that your organization is not capable of executing on your strategy and your strategic will. That is the problem. And that is what we need to solve. Before going into that, I would like to highlight a definition of innovation. So, quoting Joseph Schumpeter, saying that innovation is the creative destruction where entrepreneur combined existing element in new ways. That's an overall description. That could be broken down into two buckets. Incremental innovation, which means step by step, small chunks, or continuous improvements if you want to. And radical innovation, that is big leaps. And it could be around your business model, around your management system, around your organizational structure, around your processes, around your products, around your production, or around your services. So why is it not working on an overall level? So let me extract a few things from our assessment we made all over the world. We did a research project in 2018, and we published a paper that was presented at IEEE in December 2018 in Bangkok, where we proved that radical innovators are more structured in decision making and ideation than incremental innovators working step by step. What's also very interesting is that incremental innovators are not radical, but radical innovators are also incremental. Why? Well, if you're not structured as a radical innovator, you will be gone. You need to be structured as a radical innovator. You will not survive otherwise. If you're incremental innovators working in small steps, it might be sufficient to do what you did yesterday and just repeat old patterns until things change. And then it goes very quick downhill. So the 5 top blockers that we discovered was that organizations working in silos, they efficiently hindering innovation. And organizations that do not believe in the objectives are also hindering innovation. If you don't have a belief, a higher purpose, that will also hinder innovation. If you're afraid of failure, that will also hinder innovation. And if you can't accept uncertainty, that will also hinder innovation. These are the 5 top blockers that are generic. Then each and one of all organizations have their own profile, of course. What I'm going to do now is to give an example. I'm going to show to you an analysis we did in April 2nd. And then we have redone this analysis every month. And we were very accurate already in April. I'm using this as an example because with the COVID-19, the world is under brutal pressure. And when the pressure is high enough, every system adapts. That is how nature works. The problem is the price is too high. It's too much suffering. It is too much financial and economic losses. And it's totally unnecessary. But we adapted because we don't have any choice. So I will show to you examples on how Europe, US, and China started and how they actually adopted to what they have to do, but the losses and the price is way too high. I haven't done this analysis for Saudi. I did it on EU, US, and China, and this is just an example. If we like to, maybe we can meet again, and I can do it for the Gulf region or for Saudi and your neighbors. The interesting thing here is that if we talk about silos, before the COVID-19, and just when it started, and we realized that China and Italy had issues in Europe, we didn't care. We didn't help them. We were in silos. Then, in the current situation, Europe has actually started to coordinate. It's unbelievable. Unfortunately, it is slowing down a little bit, but with the second wave, they're going to continue to collaborate. And again, if they did it from the beginning, the price would be lower. Now they do it because they don't have any choice. If we take US, there were no federal help at all. And now there is federal support because they have to collaborate. In China, they held back information. They didn't want to tell anyone. But suddenly, and this is interesting, they became, a role model. They open up to the world and they spread information. Unbelievable. Fantastic. If we take faith in objectives, in the beginning, Europe they had very poor scenarios. And the scenarios was very different between the countries. Today, Europe had a unified response. They have unified goals, unified scenarios. They act as a unit. In US, in the beginning of the pandemic, they couldn't even decide on the goals for ventilators and masks. And then suddenly the president invoked the Defense Production Act for producing ventilators. And this is a big thing. To invoke the Defense Production Act. It's only been done once, and it was during the Second World War. In China, they had a brutal lockdown to start with because they acted in panic and they didn't have a plan. And then suddenly, they had a plan and they opened up step by step under very controlled form, and today it's working very nicely. And they have faith in their objectives. The higher purpose then. In Europe, we were only discussing Brexit and it was increased protectionism. And along the road or down the road, people started to rely on the idea behind the European Union. And suddenly they took actions unitedly and said, we are one Europe, we need to help each other. In the US, in the beginning, they didn't have any support to the society at all. I lived there, it was awful to see. And then suddenly, they had a systematic increased responsibility, focusing on the consequence of the economy, and they did very well. Now, let's see what's happening. Hope for the best. In China, they preserved the power for the ruling elite in the beginning. And then they open up and become the world leader, the role model. It's a very clever move. When it comes to fear, Europe was not willing to approve non-certified equipment. Instead, they said, well, we do have masks, but they are not certified, so we do not use them. Down the road, they had to accept it is better to use non-certified equipment than people dying. They have to just accept the fear of failing, because it's better to fail than not to try. And in the US, no one was willing to accept any kind of social restrictions. They were not willing to forbid bulk purchases. They were not willing to put any limit on how much you can raise the price on certain consumer goods. Suddenly, they had a joint response, and they actually forced social restrictions and laws against pricing, and companies were forbidding bulk purchase. And in China, in the beginning, they denied the existence of the COVID, and suddenly they open up and showcase lessons learned, and we're not afraid at all. When it comes to uncertainty, in the beginning of the COVID-19 situation, Europe had very bad forecasting and very divergent strategies. And suddenly, they started to become better in forecasting, and they did it via testing. And testing is essential in any kind of innovation strategy. And forecasts were complemented with degree of uncertainty. And this is unbelievable. There is not one single, at least not one single known journalist or politician in Europe that ever talked about the degree of uncertainty. They were only talking about probabilities, as they could foresee everything, and you can't, especially not in a change like this. Now, both journalists and politicians start actually to add the degree of uncertainty and accept it to exist as a concept. In the US, they couldn't decide on any goals for testing, and unfortunately, they still can't do that. So that change is not really there yet. In China, they had lack of knowledge in the beginning, so of course, they didn't have any way to deal with it. But along the road, with extensive testing, tracking, and social distancing, they learned to handle uncertainty and to bring uncertainty to certainty. So this is interesting. When we put enough pressure on a system, it self-regulates, but the price is too high. The suffering, the financial, the economics, and the generation to come that were under lockdown, kids that couldn't go to school. Why? We knew all of this already. And if we can organize removing these blockers, that's like the first step. The second step is to make sure to build the right capability and culture to execute on our strategy. But just start with these 5. And you will be so much better off as a company, as a country, as a region. So I extracted a graph, and I have done this every month with a cumulative confirmed COVID-19 deaths. And as you can see here, you can see the top curve and the one in the bottom, and then you have a good number in between, the gray one here. And as you can see, Singapore and South Korea have very, very few confirmed deaths compared with the US. And the US is skyrocketing right now. And it's very sad. And it could be avoided. I'm now going to show you data from those countries and how well prepared they are for handling radical innovation and the aspiration of radical innovation. And this is built upon data we have from governments, ministries, organizations, companies, non-profits, the health system, and we aggregated that and did an analysis how ready you are to execute on your strategic will, and if the strategic will is also to be able to cope with and maybe even voluntarily do radical innovation. So the aspiration for radical innovation in Singapore is very, very high compared with the US. And South Korea is also quite high. So US have a little bit of radical innovation. And of course, you find radical innovators in Silicon Valley, and you find a few in New York. Outside those areas, you will not find it. In average, the aspiration for radical innovation in the US is quite low. There are countries that are even lower, but it's not high. While it's very high in Singapore and South Korea. And then we looked on the capabilities. We did a correlation analysis. And we identified 8 capabilities that are highly correlated to the aspiration for radical innovation. Then we looked at each and one of those 8 capabilities. And we looked how high do each country score in average. And it was astonishing because Singapore and South Korea outperform the US on these 8 capabilities that are highly correlated to radical innovation. Here is the formula. I don't say this is easy. You might need to run pretty big transformation programs to change your capabilities. Even worse, you might need to change your aspiration. But if you can change the aspiration and you can build the right capabilities, and if you assess your organization, you will know which level you are on for each one of those 8. And then you can assess how well you are suited to execute on an incremental innovation strategy. You can also break it up further and further and further. And this is the beauty of doing a 360 innovation management assessment, that you can actually X-ray and understand the organization on a deep level and take the right measures to close the gaps, removing the blockers, and be successful. So this is a demonstration on country level. The problem is not the lack of ideas. We have a lot of ideas. People tend to think that innovation is about ideas. No. It is about getting a lot of ideas and combine them, challenging them, putting up hypotheses, testing the hypothesis, using your resources in a smart way to execute on strategic possibilities on the market. So basically, it is about getting where, why, what, how, and who. This is a model from Gary Hamel. I had the pleasure to meet him several times. It's a really nice chap. He created this model way back, and I like to show this model because it illustrates very clearly what's happening right now. We are in a sudden collapse, but this pattern been around as long as humanity been around. And just recent years, we had major bankruptcies, and now we have even more. Company like Hertz, the biggest car rental company in the world, Nokia, Toys R Us, General Motors, Kodak, Sears, Brooks Brothers. It's unbelievable. They're gone. And then they try to recreate them again. I don't believe, unfortunately, that they will succeed. Maybe Nokia, but the rest, I think the probability is not that high. Let me put it that way. So now it is time to act. We are in the middle of a crisis. We know what to do. We need to take control. We need to mitigate uncertainty. We need to collaborate in clusters. We need to experiment and learn. And we need to adapt to the new normal. So I did this picture in April. I have made very small changes. It seems to be still what we will see. We will see revised healthcare policies, and it already happened, by the way, all over the world. But we will also see pocket of protectionism and increased surveillance of people. We will see rebuilding supply chains, even totally reimagined supply chains, totally new kind of supply chain. We will also see a new way of working among people. We will see new superclusters emerging, moving fast, knowing nothing about geographical borders, using internet. We will see electrification and automation boost. All of this is happening, and we have to adapt. And we need to use it as a good force to fix things that are broken. In a nutshell, you can say that innovation management is about creating a balance, an equilibrium between now and the future. We live in S-curves, and I'm writing on a new book, Play Bold. It will be launched in January. You will see that I do a really deep dive into S-curves. You can also listen to my podcast, Play Bold, if you would like to have more insights. What I'm exploring, and where we do a lot of work together with our great partners, is around S-curves. You are born, you grow, you mature, and you fade away. And this pattern is for everybody except God. The society, your company, your animals, yourself. We just have to accept it and have faith. This is how it is. But we should take care of our S-curve. We should extend the S-curve and stick around. That's important. It's our duty to do that. We also need to understand that we can leapfrog, we can jump to the next S-curve if we find the next S-curve. And this is the luxury with an organization or a country, that we can actually reinvent the country, we can reinvent the organization, and it can survive us. And this is fantastic. It is good news. We can create a good world for our kids and our grandkids. We can actually be on top of the world if we want to. We just have to figure out how to jump between the S-curves. Extend it, make money, use the money, jump, and repeat that pattern. And to make this jump is the radical innovation. For that, you need the right aspiration from the leadership, and you need to have the right capability and the right leadership, the way of leading, and you need to have the right culture. Then you can do that. And this is a very positive thing. And this is risk mitigation. But try to do what you did yesterday and do more of it. That was never a good idea. And today it is a really bad idea. I like to map this to the 3 horizon model published in 1999. This is a model about uncertainty. Unfortunately, it is misused. It is used linked to time, where horizon 1 is now and horizon 3 is the future. But it's actually wrong. It is the wrong interpretation. It is about uncertainty. The 3rd horizon is uncertain. We don't know. We need to learn. The return is insight, learning. In the second horizon, we know a little. And the return is data. We do experiments and we learn from the experiments like piloting, prototyping. We have data. And in the first horizon, where it is very known, we use the data to make clever decisions. That's where you could do a business case. That's where you could do return on investment calculus. That is not possible in Horizon 3, and it is almost impossible in Horizon 2. And if you understand these mechanisms, you can actually risk mitigate. There is a very large study done by PricewaterhouseCoopers. It is made 2010, and it has been remade every year since then. It shows that if you are a spender, which means that you don't have an innovation strategy, and you compare that with having an innovation strategy, you will grow faster, you will earn more money, and your market capitalization, the value of your company, will be higher. And if you also make sure to have the right capabilities to support your strategy, you will earn even more and you will grow even more. So it is a very good idea to assess your capability and your strategic will and make sure that you have what you need in place to execute on your strategic will. At the end of the day, it is about culture, structure, and acting. Culture is about the right aspiration, the right leadership, supporting values, capabilities, and structure is to have scenarios. You need to work with scenarios. And you need to have a fast innovation management system in place with clear KPIs, which is key performance indicators or metrics. You need to have what I call a pre-stage gated funnel. That means that you need to work before you go into your stage gated process. A stage gated process means that you work with like milestones. And then you have to iterate over decision points and maybe also do to remake your decisions. Then you need fast feedback loops where you get feedback from the market. Acting is about establishing a command center. You need a brain, if I put it that way. And you need to quantify predictions into probability and degree of uncertainty. You need to take your scenarios and say, this is certain, this is uncertain. This is likely, this is not likely. This is feasible, this is not feasible. And then you can actually find out what way to go. You need to test, learn, and work with hypotheses. And you need to start to act as an anthropologist. You need to observe. And this is one of the key components in acting. Study. Look what people are doing. Do not ask them. So I have a small exercise for you guys. So let's see if this is working. So I need some help from my friends here. I would like you in the chat box to put a name on one person that is born 1948, have 2 kids, is very wealthy, it is British, and it's a famous person. So a famous person that is British, wealthy, have 2 kids, and born 1948. If you can go to the chat box and just give me a few ideas, and maybe one of my friends can just read the name loud, that would be great. This is an experiment, and I'm going to show you why we do this experiment very soon. So please go to the chat box and post a few ideas, and then maybe some of the guys here on the panel could read loud a few things that goes into the chat box. Remember, no fear of failure. This is not the test. This is to make an illustration. If you're born 1948, how old are you then? You're like...
Prince Charles. Amal Uthman says Prince Charles. Hind says Sir Winston Leonard Spencer.
Yeah, good one.
Yeah.
I will give you two very different profiles, okay?
Okay.
Prince Charles and Ozzy Osbourne. And Ozzy Osbourne is a crazy guy. It's like a death metal artist. These two guys, they don't have much in common, right? But they have the same data set. This is the whole point. Anthropology is essential. If you think for a second that you can use big data and artificial intelligence to make clever decisions, sorry, this is just an example how weird it could be. So you need to learn, you need to act as an anthropologist. That is key to succeed with innovation. And it's key to interpret data. So start to observe and learn. And use that to do experiments to generate data. Do not just take the data you have. Without the learning curve, the data is meaningless. You need to learn, collect data, and use the data to build proper business cases. So, to act as an anthropologist is essential. And we need to find many feeders to feed our system. One feeders is to act as an anthropologist and encourage people to do so and to leave ideas in an ideation platform. Other feeders could be to do camera analysis. It could be to do data analysis, but it needs to be data that you do understand. And there are a good number of feeders that you can use. And those could be feeded in, and you can create big ideas. That's a cluster of ideas. And then you can start to say, is this very uncertain? Then it is the third horizon, and you can do experiments to learn. Or is it mid-uncertain in the second horizon? You can do prototyping and piloting. Or is it actually the first horizon and very certain? Then you can just jump into your regular process. How do you move it from the second horizon to the first horizon? Well, you test in tiers. You start with near testing in the closed environment around you. And then you have the field testing, and then you have the market testing. This is risk mitigation. And the steps you take is to discover, incubate, accelerate, institutionalize. To be able to do this, you need to understand your organization. That's also why it is very important to assess your organization, to understand the capability and the culture. And innovation is like an iceberg. The big part is under the surface, actually. And you need to move your organization from being unconscious incompetent, which is a very nice stage. You are very happy because you don't know. Then you move up to be conscious incompetent, which is very annoying, very frustrating. And then you become conscious competent, and as a master, you become unconscious competent. And you need to move through these steps. And the way to do that is to assess your organization with the why, what, and how. That goes into aspiration and ability. And this I show you on the screen here is the framework that I created and published, and that my great partner here in Saudi is using. So this is the way of understanding where you are today. And then you can put up a future goal and say, this is where I want to go. And the key takeaway is that in the first horizon, you need to explore and to learn where you stand today. And you need to have the capability of setting goals and executing on goals. And you need to understand the market, and you need to understand what I call incremental technology shift, which means small technology shift. In the second horizon, you need to expand, and you need to look on things that is close to you, but you need to go out of your comfort zone. And you need to build the capability for challenging yourself and to go to work every day to grow your business. And you need to understand people, users. You need to relate to new technology. And in the third horizon, it's about exploring and find new opportunities. It is about mapping the future, to build scenarios, to co-creating together with others. And the three cornerstones is the strategy, where you align your will with your goals and with your abilities on the inside, which is basically the capability, the leadership, and the culture. And the portfolio should be risk mitigated and weighted, and you should actually use the horizon model or any other kind of equivalent model to understand the uncertainty. Because if you don't do that, you might end up with having just uncertain product or just certain product, and neither of it is good. You need to create a balance to be able to map the S-curves and be able to figure out how to jump between them. And the third one is execution, where you need a process, a governance, an organization, and the operational model. And all of these things goes very nicely together. The external outlook with scenarios. When we work, we use a pest-led tool. That's also our partner's way of doing it. And then we have the inner survey for doing the assessment internally. We map that with Scenarios 360 to purpose, vision, and mission. We link that to the corporate strategy. We link that to goals for innovation. We're using collaboration tools to iron out strategic initiatives. We use the ideation platform to come up with ideas. We feed that into the innovation portfolio with the projects. And under that, we have the innovation management system with the governance, the process, the organization, and the operational model. So everything goes very nicely together, and it is a very efficient way of working.
Thank you, Mr. Magnus, for being with us and giving us this nice talk about the innovation and how can we turn back to the saddle. So we would like to thank you very much. And